will you burn? Well, that is dependent on, most importantly, how hard you exercise and somewhat on how long you exercise. If your number one reason not to exercise is your time, which is the number one excuse that I hear all the time, then this technique of going very hard, but for a short time, eliminates that excuse. Well, how do you start? Do you just go out and sprint? Chances are we won't last very long. And if you're like me, you'll probably injure yourself. Instead, warm up with a few minutes of walking and things like jumping jacks, lunges, or body weight squats. And then break your workout sessions into segments of high-intensity efforts and easy recovery. You can find access to a number of interval or HIIT workouts online, in training books, or from a coach. Now, some interval workouts go by minutes, and some go by distance, and some just go by how you feel. But the goal is always to work hard during the active phase and then recover for a period of time before the next active or work phase. As you become more fit, you can extend the hard work phase and decrease the recovery time. A reasonable place to start could be 30 seconds very hard, followed by 1 minute of easy recovery. You could even try mailbox or telephone pole intervals, where you simply run hard from mailbox 1 to mailbox 2, and then go easy until mailbox 3, and then repeat. You might even find interval exercise to be more enjoyable, as it breaks your workout down into segments and makes the time go by more quickly. Actually, it does go by more quickly because you can work out for less total time. Research shows that interval training results in greater overall adherence to exercise and may be more enjoyable than continuous, lower intensity exercise. This is just one of many reasons for its effectiveness. In fact, in my own research, we've shown that interval training combined with resistance training is incredibly effective for reducing body fat levels. HIIT is thought to have this effect in part because it's been shown to increase mitochondrial density and to increase the number and activity of enzymes like citrate synthase, malate dehydrogenase, and others needed to break down carbohydrates and fat to make ATP. In some HIIT research, changes in these enzymes were shown after just 7 weeks of exercising 3 days per week by doing 4 to 10 30-second maximal sprints on a bike, followed by 4 minutes of recovery. HIIT has also been shown to be as effective, or maybe even more effective, at improving heart health than low-intensity exercise that burned the same number of calories. So, when it comes to exercise intensity for fat loss, choose higher over lower. And the best way to do this may be through interval training. And keep in mind, though, that this level of activity is very hard, so you really shouldn't do it every day. It's best to mix in days of HIIT and days of slow to moderate intensity aerobic exercise. This should help to maximize fat loss and keep you from getting hurt. And start with an amount of time that you can fit into your schedule. We've shown great results with HIIT for just 20 to 30 minutes. Essentially, you can start with very little exercise and have a great response for improving your body composition. This brings up the next question. How often should you be exercising? Frequency is the last important aspect of exercise to help with weight and health. This refers to the number of times you exercise per week. For general health, you should exercise 3 to 5 days per week, according to the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines. But what about for fat loss specifically? These same guidelines suggest aerobic exercise should be completed at least 5 days a week to maintain or increase weight loss. Think about it. The more often you exercise, the more opportunities throughout the week you have to burn calories, both doing the actual exercise and after exercise too. So it's in your best interest then to slowly increase the number of planned workout sessions per week to take advantage of both of these opportunities. For fat loss, you now know that it's best to incorporate multiple types of exercise: aerobic, HIIT training, and resistance. But for aerobic endurance exercise, here are a few ways to get the most possible fat loss from your workouts. First, move lots of muscle. This is why running may be most effective for fat loss. Second, choose higher intensity exercise through interval training rather than low intensity exercise, even when the same caloric cost is happening. Third, exercise longer rather than shorter when comparing exercises of the same intensity. And fourth, exercise at least 5 days per week to see the most improvement. If you're feeling overwhelmed, don't worry. It is best to only make one change at a time. For example, to try to change up your exercise in one small way today that is practical for you. Then, little by little, try to incorporate more of these options to maximize fat loss. It is not a good idea to change everything all at once. In fact, this is a sure way to failure. Let me explain. You will not begin your program at 6 days a week for 60 minutes a time doing intervals. Instead, you would follow another principle of exercise science, which is progression. And be sure to progress your exercise plan and push yourself within reason. Why? Because if you incorporated all these suggestions immediately, chances are you will become overwhelmed and drop the fitness thing altogether. But something is better than nothing, and more is better than less in most cases. And as you feel comfortable, you can begin to tailor that something towards fat loss. This way, you can achieve more than you already do each and every day. Now that we've talked about aerobic exercise, what about resistance training for fat loss? In a number of research studies that I've been working on over the years, we've demonstrated that combining high-intensity interval training and resistance training is most effective for fat loss and improving body composition. It turns out that resistance training is a very powerful tool for changing body composition. You see, with only aerobic exercise, it is far easier to change your overall size, but much harder to alter the way that it looks physically. I often say that you can change from a big pear shape to a small pear shape, but you need to add resistance exercise if you truly want to add lean muscle and change the way you look. Adding lean mass from resistance training is important for fat loss specifically. Why and how is this the case? Well, the addition of resistance training to your activity may kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone. It will add lean muscle mass, which is metabolically active. This means that it uses a few more calories than other tissues and contributes to your total daily caloric output. In a previous lecture, I described muscle tissue as very metabolically active tissue, or hungry tissue. This means that muscle tissue specifically requires a little bit more energy to be maintained than fat mass. Therefore, the greater amount of muscle mass on your body, the greater energy demands overall, which equals more calories expended each day just for body maintenance. Resistance training actually increases lipolysis or fat mobilization. In fact, our research group published a few research papers on this in the Journal of Applied Physiology. We found that resistance training alone was effective for increased lipolysis from belly fat in healthy young men and in both sedentary lean and obese men. Resistance training also increases EPOC, or excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, just like aerobic exercise, but maybe even more. For example, after 45 minutes of cycling at 70% of maximum, metabolism stayed high for another 14 hours, burning about 190 calories over a control group. Similarly, traditional resistance training with 4 sets of 8 exercises done for 8 to 12 repetitions has been shown to burn about 100 extra calories over the 22 hours following resistance exercise. However, the authors of this study also found that if the resistance exercise was completed at a much higher intensity, this time using heavy weight to complete exhaustion for 6 repetitions, with only 20 seconds of rest between sets, the calorie burn was 23% greater than the traditional group. The high-intensity group burned 452 calories over the same 22-hour period. And best of all, most of the extra burn was from fat. Now, these studies were done in men, but the authors suggested that when body mass is equated, no difference between men and women exists. So combining the fat-burning effect of aerobic and resistance exercise seems to offer the maximal benefits for fat loss, as described in several recent studies from my lab and others. The combination also looks to be more favorable than aerobic exercise alone in combating certain types of chronic disease, including muscle wasting, osteoporosis, and perhaps even type 2 diabetes. Exactly which kinds of resistance exercise will increase muscle mass, referred to as hypertrophy, will be covered later. But for now, realize the incredibly important role of resistance exercise for fat loss. We've discussed the basis for aerobic exercise and resistance exercise for fat loss. How can we determine if we are successful? How quickly or slowly should we expect to lose fat based on these described principles? I will end our discussion with a few more rules of thumb for rating your fat loss success. It is important to mention first that your rate of fat loss will be different from others depending on your age, your sex, how much fat you have to lose, as well as your unique physiology. In general, fat loss should be gradual. A small amount should be lost every week, which would add up